That's not a glitch, Dad. Someone's hijacking the system. Maya Williams's voice was too calm for a 12-year-old girl holding a mop in one hand and staring at a blinking red monitor in the server corridor of HeartLesson Systems. Her father, Earl, was down on one knee beside her, scrubbing a coffee stain from the polished floor tile. He paused, grunted without looking up. "You're seeing ghosts again, Maya. That's just a maintenance screen." But Maya didn't blink. Her eyes were fixed on the digital interface mounted just above the service rack. Static flashed, then black. Then strings of cascading code lit up in red. They weren't supposed to be there. Not this early. Not in this part of the building. It was 5:48 a.m., and Earl had brought Maya along for his before-sunrise janitorial shift. HeartLesson Systems, the tech giant behind some of the nation's top government contracts, was usually a fortress at this hour. But the West Wing had been left unlocked for floor waxing. Earl figured it was safe enough to bring his daughter. Maya never wandered. She was a quiet shadow who loved machines more than cartoons. Maya's mop handle clattered to the floor. She took a small step toward the server unit, eyes narrowed. "That's not just a screen error," she whispered. "Someone's tunneling into their backup drives." Earl stood slowly, wiping his hands on his overalls. "Now hold on. We don't mess with nothing that don't belong to us, you hear?" "I didn't touch anything," Maya pointed. "But if they don't stop it, the admin core will start replicating malicious code to the client branches. That's millions of dollars." Her voice was dead serious. No excitement, no guessing, just fact. 3 floors up, Clara Monroe was already en route to her office, latte in hand and phone to her ear. As CEO of HeartLesson, her mornings began before most people had brushed their teeth. But this morning, her executive dashboard refused to load. The fingerprint access pad to the strategy room buzzed red. By 6:01, her tech director called her from the basement, this voice trembling. "We're seeing multiple breaches. It looks like internal takeover. The data nodes aren't responding to shutdown commands." "What's the potential damage?" she asked. "If we don't isolate it in the next 15 minutes, we could lose Project Echo and the DoD node mirror. That's everything." Clara dropped her coffee without noticing. Back in the corridor, Earl had finally crouched beside his daughter to get a better look. He didn't understand most of what he saw, but he knew enough from years of quietly listening to Maya mutter about algorithms and logic trees to recognize something was very wrong. "You sure about this?" Maya nodded. "The script's elegant. It loops, it hides, it mimics internal testing signals. That's why they didn't catch it. But it's not from here. It's foreign. Whoever wrote it knows how to make it look like system diagnostics." Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm wailed through the hallway. Maya didn't flinch. Earl stood protectively in front of her. A moment later, 2 IT staffers came running around the corner, faces pale. One of them, the younger man, froze when he saw Maya pointing at the terminal. "What are you two doing here?" "Cleaning," Earl said, lifting his badge. Maya pointed. "Check the parity logs from last night, around 2:07 a.m. That's when it started tunneling. But it's cloaked. You'll need to reverse the node path from internal route F4. The older techie blinked. "How the hell do you know that?" Maya shrugged. "I read fast." The younger one stepped forward, glancing at the screen, then at Maya. "Wait, she's right. 2, see the pattern? She's right. Get this to Miss Monroe," the older one barked, already pulling a secure tablet from his belt. By 6:15, Clara Monroe had a full team crowded in the lower-level server room. Maya and Earl stood off to the side, Maya holding a yellow mop bucket like a misplaced ghost. Clara stared at the girl, then at the reams of code running across the mainframe monitors. "Who is this?" "My daughter," Earl said quietly. "Get her out of here." But before the guards could move, her lead engineer held up a hand. "Ma'am, the girl's right. She flagged the code before we did. If we run her trace model, we might still isolate the source before the auto backups push it company-wide." Clara Monroe blinked, then walked straight up to Maya. She looked her overtorn hoodie, sneakers too big, a curious fire in her eyes. You have 60 seconds. Tell me exactly what you saw." Maya stepped forward. She didn't smile. She didn't stammer. She just pointed to the lines of code and said, "You were trying to lock down the breach, but that wasn't the entry point. They already got in last night before your diagnostics updated." I think they slipped in through a dummy file that looked like a system patch, but I can find it. How? I drew a map, she said simply, unrolling a napkin from her pocket covered in graphite lines and tiny numbers. Clara stared at it, then at her. Then draw it again. On my glass wall now. Maya didn't move. Can my dad stay? She asked softly. Clara hesitated. Yes. Oh. So Maya walked forward, mop water still clinging to her sleeves, and began to draw. And across the command room of a billion-dollar company, silence fell because the janitor's daughter had just become their best shot at survival. Clara Monroe didn't speak as Maya finished the diagram on the glass wall, a sprawling web of connections, protocol paths, and redirect clusters drawn with the confidence of someone twice her age. Behind her, a room full of engineers watched in stunned silence. The girl's handwriting was neat, deliberate, and somehow, doubting familiar. It echoed the precision of someone who not only knew the system, but respected its depth. She's mapping out a reverse tunnel, whispered someone from the crowd. Maya stepped back from the wall and turned to face them. This loop here, she pointed, is where the rogue code's replicating. It's disguised as a backup sync, but it's bouncing off a spoofed internal signature. You've been feeding it credentials every 10 minutes without knowing. Clara crossed her arms. So how do we stop it? Maya glanced nervously at her father. Earl gave a gentle nod, his eyes telling her it was okay. You'll need to lock the signal out from all local mirrors, but that won't work unless you rebuild the admin tree from the Korth Real core, the fallback node in San Jose. Everyone froze. You mean the physical backup? That's not even online yet, one engineer stammered. It's in cold storage. Maya nodded. Exactly. That's why it's clean. Clara looked to her lead tech. Can we get access remotely? The man hesitated. If she's right, and I think she is, we'll have to elevate privileges from within the legacy shell. That means manual override. Then do it, Clara said sharply. The team scattered, leaving Maya and Earl alone by the wall. Earl kneeled beside his daughter, voice low. Sweetheart, how'd you know all that? You've never even touched their systems. I read their protocols last year when you cleaned the copy room, Maya said. They left the old manuals out, and I remembered the test ports I saw yesterday. I just put it together. Earl exhaled slowly. You always were different. Upstairs, chaos simmered under a veneer of calm. Board members were dialing into emergency sessions. Legal advisors whispered in corners, and Clara Monroe walked swiftly through the hall toward her office, Maya's napkin diagram still in her hand. She stopped in front of her assistant. Find out everything you can about that girl. Quietly. No press, no chatter. The assistant nodded and got to work. Back in the server corridor, the engineers worked frantically under Maya's hand-drawn instructions. Maya herself sat on a bench, swinging her feet slightly as she ate a granola bar Earl had packed for her. I'm gonna get fired, Earl muttered beside her. No, you're not, Maya said. You didn't break anything. He chuckled under his breath, but his eyes were still wide, darting nervously every time someone important walked by. Suddenly, one of the tech leads came sprinting toward them. We need her upstairs. Earl stood protectively. Now hold on, she's just a child. But the man ignored him. She's the only one who understands the patchwork enough to navigate the route. If we don't give her a terminal, we'll lose the sync window in 5 minutes. Clara arrived a moment later, her tone calm but ironclad. Mr. Williams, Earl, I promise you I will personally be in that room. She'll be safe. And if she helps us pull this off, she won't leave here just the janitor's daughter anymore. Earl looked at Maya. She looked back, then nodded. In the top-floor emergency control suite, the lights were dimmed. Dozens of screens flickered with red alerts and progress logs. Maya was given a stool, a secure console, and 3 engineers standing behind her like a holy trinity of doubt. But when her fingers hit the keys, silence fell again. Command by command, she moved through the layers like someone who belonged. Her eyes didn't dart, her breath didn't stammer. She was in a flow calm, steady, absorbed. Then the screen flickered. We're in, one engineer breathed. She just tunneled into the legacy shell. 30 seconds, another warned. Maya typed a final command, sat back, and said, shut down all local bridges now. The room held its breath. And then green. The cascade of alarms stopped. One by one, monitors cleared. The threat was isolated, the breach severed. A shear erupted. But Maya didn't smile. She just exhaled quietly and turned to Earl. "Can we go home now?" Clara stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking on the tile. "Maya," she said, "you just saved a corporation from a multi-million-dollar catastrophe." I didn't mean to," Maya replied. "I just didn't want the screen to lie. If you think Maya is a truly smart little girl, give her a like. And don't forget to comment where you're watching this from, who knows. Someone nearby might be quietly watching this story at the same time as you." Clara looked at her, really looked at her. "Would you like to come back tomorrow? Not to clean, to learn. We could use a mind like yours." Maya hesitated. "Can my dad come at 2? Clara smiled. "Yes. In fact, he'll be on payroll with a new title, Senior Facility Supervisor." Earl's jaw dropped. Maya reached out and squeezed his hand. Outside, the morning sun had finally risen, and somewhere in the heart of Silicon Valley, a janitor's daughter had rewritten her future with nothing but a napkin and a truth no one else could see. The following morning, the break room at Sloan Tech headquarters was unusually quiet. Word had spread like wildfire about the breach, the narrow escape, and most of all, about the little girl in sneakers and a janitor's badge, who had outmaneuvered a cyber attack that nearly crippled the company. People didn't say her name out loud yet, but they whispered about her. The ones who had witnessed it firsthand were still processing what they'd seen. Down in the facilities wing, Earl Williams was back in uniform, but this time it was cleaner, newer. The patch on his chest now read, Supervisor. He stood at the janitor's station with a clipboard, pretending to check inventory while watching his daughter sip chocolate milk from a paper carton at a staff table. "I'm not used to people looking at me like that," Maya mumbled, barely meeting his eyes. Earl smiled gently. "They're not looking at you, baby. They're seeing you. That's different." Clara Monroe entered a few moments later, sharp in her gray blazer and navy trousers. She walked with purpose but paused when she saw Maya. Her tone softened. "Good morning, Maya." "Hi," Maya said, wary. Clara approached slowly, her hands unclasped, as if trying not to spook a wild animal. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did yesterday. Not just the fix, but how you kept your head when the rest of us were losing ours." Maya looked down at her shoes. "I don't like loud yelling. It scrambles my thoughts, so I focus harder to block it out." Clara blinked, momentarily thrown off by the honesty. She recovered quickly. "Well, that focus saved us millions. The board is curious. They'd like to meet you." Earl tensed. "She's not a showpiece." "Of course not," Clara replied. "But I think she deserves to be seen by more than just hallway gossip." Later that afternoon, in the 12th floor executive boardroom, Maya sat at one end of a long glass table, her feet dangling a good 6 inches above the floor. The board members, a mix of older men and sharp-dressed women, murmured and clicked pens as Clara introduced her. "She's not a hacker," Clara clarified. "She's a pattern reader. What she did wasn't luck, it was insight." One of the directors leaned forward. "How old are you, Maya?" 11, she replied. "But I'll be 12 next March." Another director asked, "Did someone teach you these systems?" "No," Maya said. "I just watched, read. Then I tried to figure out why things worked the way they did. If something didn't make sense, I traced it until it did." There was a long silence. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "Well, that's more initiative than I've seen from half our IT staff." Some laughed, others didn't. Clara stood again. "I propose a mentorship program, something quiet, in-house. Maya works part-time with the cybersecurity team under direct supervision. No PR, no press. Just a chance to cultivate talent. And, of course, we'll compensate her family accordingly." Maya looked at her father. Earl met her gaze, then nodded slowly. "Okay," Maya said, "but I don't want to wear anything with shoulder pads." The room chuckled. A formality passed. The vote was unanimous. That evening, as they rode home on the city bus, Maya sat beside her father, watching the lights blur outside the window. "Do you think they really mean it?" she asked. Earl considered his answer. "I think they saw something they didn't expect, and now they're trying to catch up to it." Maya pulled her knees up on the seat. "I don't want to change. I just want to understand things, like what makes people do dumb stuff with smart machines." Earl smiled. "That might be your greatest strength, you know. You see the whole puzzle, not just the pieces. At home, Maya pulled out her old composition notebook and started sketching a new network layout not for the company, but for herself. A dream map, connections between the parts of her world. Dad, school, code, silence, the janitor's closet, the glass boardroom. Each line was clean, each path intentional. She didn't know it yet, but that sketch would become the foundation of Sloan Tech's internal training protocol for the next decade. The next morning, Maya returned to the building through the front entrance for the first time. She held a temporary badge clipped to her hoodie. Her name was printed neatly across it. Maya Williams, Junior Systems Advisor, Provisional. She passed by a young man at reception who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Others in the lobby turned, half smiling, half curious. Upstairs, the cyber team had already prepared a workspace for her, a modest desk with a monitor, a whiteboard, and a basket of snacks. Clara greeted her with a nod but gave her space. "Take your time. Explore. Ask anything," she said. Maya sat down, placed her fingers on the keyboard, and breathed in. This time there was no breach, no panic, just possibility. And in the corner of the office, Earl stood silently, mop in hand, smiling through quiet tears. A week had passed since Maya Williams began her quiet, watchful presence in the Sloan Tech cybersecurity unit. While the rest of the staff buzzed with reports and metrics, Maya moved like a shadow among machines and murmurs. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when she did, it was always something that made people stop and think twice. Today, she was sketching an access flow chart on her whiteboard when a low voice startled her. "That's not the standard model. Where'd you learn that loop structure?" Maya turned to find Julian Marks, the company's senior cyber defense officer, eyeing her board. He was tall, dark-skinned, and built like a linebacker who had traded shoulder pads for server racks. His reputation for bluntness and zero tolerance had made interns cry more than once. "I didn't learn it," Maya said, uncapping a new marker. "I noticed the system doesn't like nested conditions with overlapping logs, so I mapped a cleaner bypass." Julian narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Then he crossed the room, tapped a few keys on his tablet, and froze. "You're right. We've been getting minor latency spikes exactly where your loop would fix it." Clara Monroe stepped into the room just in time to catch his reaction. "Problem? Number solution," Julian muttered, then turned to Maya. "How about you come sit in on the Thursday strategy meeting? Just listen for now." Maya blinked. "Do I have to talk?" "No," Clara said, smiling, "but we might ask you to write." That Thursday, Maya sat quietly near the back of the sleek conference room, a spiral notebook balanced on her lap. Executives and analysts huddled over projections, behavioral threat maps, and breach forensics from recent global attacks. The jargon flew thick and fast. When a diagram appeared on the screen with a tangled thread of data clusters, Maya tilted her head, squinting. Something was off. She stared at the lines longer than anyone else in the room. Julian noticed her expression. "See something, kid?" Maya hesitated. Then she stood, walked to the whiteboard at the side of the room, and drew a single box in the center. "This one here," she said, circling it. "It's not a normal endpoint. The access timestamps are too regular, like it's automated. But nobody's noticing because it mimics backup protocols." There was a long silence. One of the analysts typed furiously, eyes widening. "She's right. We thought that was just a routine ping, but it's too consistent, even during maintenance blackouts." Julian's jaw tightened. Could be a sleeper script, buried for long-term extraction. Clara's voice turned steel sharp. "Kill the access now." Within minutes, the Sloan Tech cyber team was mobilized. Maya watched from the side as adults scrambled, confirming her instinct like a courtroom proving a child's testimony. It wasn't just a fluke. She was part of something now. That night, Earl picked her up at the lobby as usual. He had brought her a grilled cheese wrapped in foil and a bag of grapes. "You're quiet," he said as they stepped into the elevator. "I pointed out something today," she said slowly. "And then they fixed it. Fast. Did that surprise you?" "A little. I thought they might brush me off." Earl chuckled. "Maya, when someone saves you $100,000 before lunchtime, you start listening even if they're 4 feet tall." She grinned. It felt good. Not just to be right, but to be trusted. The next morning brought another surprise. Clara called Maya into her office leak, minimalist, with a panoramic view of the city skyline. "We're bringing in someone new," Clara said. "An external consultant to audit the breach trail. He's ex-FBI, knows how to chase ghosts in networks. His name's Everett Kane." Maya nodded, but her stomach tightened. Outsiders meant questions. Questions meant attention. She preferred wires to faces. When Everett Kane arrived, he didn't look like a tech guy. His charcoal suit, salt and pepper beard, and heavy black boots made him seem more like a retired spy than an analyst. He surveyed the room with the cautious calm of someone who'd seen things that never made the news. "You're Maya," he said, eyes crinkling. "Heard you have a mind like a trapdoor." She shifted uncomfortably. "I just notice things." "Good. That's half the job." He turned to Julian and Clara. "I want to start with a complete codebase scrub. Anything flagged as routine over the last 2 months, run it again." Julian frowned. "That's over 6 terabytes of data." "I know," Everett said. "And that's exactly where the clever ones hide." As the hours passed, Maya sat in on every scan, watching code fly across screens like rain against glass. Everett didn't talk much, but when he did, Maya listened hard. At one point, Everett leaned over her shoulder. "See that compression key?" Maya nodded. "It's a camouflage protocol. They buried their traffic inside audio files." Everett arched an eyebrow. "You spotted that without tools?" "I listen to music while I work. I heard the pattern." Everett looked impressed, genuinely. "You've got instincts. Keep following them." By dusk, they had uncovered 2 more ghost node stealthy access points waiting for reactivation. Had they gone unnoticed, Sloan Tech might have faced a full-scale internal breach. Julian clapped Everett on the back. "You were right to go deeper." Everett shook his head. "She was the one who pointed the way. I just followed the echo." That evening, Maya returned to her sketchbook. Her latest page showed more than just data flow. It depicted people, names inside circles, and arrows connecting departments and personalities. She was learning that machines weren't the only systems you had to understand. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just reacting to the world, she was shaping it. Everett Kane stood motionless in the hallway outside the server room, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Maya, trailing behind with a notepad and pen, looked up at him. "Did we miss something in the access logs?" "Number. That's just it," he replied. "They're too clean. Whoever planted those ghost nodes, someone that smart doesn't leave a door half open unless they want us to walk in." Maya's brow furrowed. "You think we were being baited?" Everett didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the door open and entered the server room again. The space was cold, humming with low energy and the quiet pulse of LED lights. But the silence wasn't peaceful, it felt calculated. Julian and Clara arrived seconds later, both looking tense. "We locked out the compromised endpoints and reset the secondary protocols," Julian said. "But I agree with Everett. Something's off." Maya had already dropped to a crouch near one of the lower racks, peering at a cluster of external ports that didn't look familiar. "This one wasn't here last week," she murmured, reaching toward a tiny embedded module near the base of the frame. Clara knelt beside her. "You sure? I helped clean this room with my dad every Saturday. He lets me polish the baseboards. That port wasn't there. It's too new." Julian examined the component, his face paling slightly. "It's not on our inventory list. Can you pull it?" Everett asked. Julian hesitated, then reached for a secure tools case. "Let's do it right." The team watched as he delicately detached the unfamiliar component. It was no larger than a thumb drive, but it had its own micro-cooling unit, an encrypted identifier chip. Everett examined it closely. "This isn't just a backdoor. It's a smart relay. It listens, adapts, then copies access behavior to mimic internal traffic." Maya stepped closer. "Like a voice mimic for data?" Everett glanced at her, impressed. "Exactly." Clara's phone buzzed, and she answered with a curt, "Monroe." Her face tightened. "You need to see this," she said to the room, putting the call on speaker. It was Angela, the director of financial security. "Our wire queue just triggered a false approval alert. Someone's rerouting approval credentials through dummy executives." Everett's jaw clenched. "It's starting. Freeze all outbound transfers. Clara ordered. Angela's voice cut in again. Already done. But if they've planted scripts like this in other sectors… They have, Everett said coldly. This relay wasn't built for one job. It's a hive. And now we need to smoke out the queen. Hours passed in a blur. The entire building was on high alert. Employees were asked to stay off the internal network. Firewalls were restructured. A physical sweep of all server rooms was ordered. Maya sat at a temporary operations desk they had set up in the main boardroom. In front of her, multiple monitors flickered with live code and behavior tracking scripts. "What are you seeing?" Everett asked as he stepped in with a cup of lukewarm coffee. Maya pointed to a string of code running quietly in the background. "This one repeats every 5 minutes. It looks harmless, but its timestamp always lags exactly 12 seconds behind all other logs." Everett's brows furrowed, which means it's not responding with the system it's watching it, reacting, not originating. She nodded. "I think it's syncing with an outside clock," Julian chimed in from another console. "That would mean it's taking orders from outside the firewall." "Which also means," Clara said as she entered, "we've got a live enemy, not just old malware." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she continued typing. She wasn't used to this kind of pressure. But something inside her, something quiet and burning, kept her going. Suddenly, one of the screens flashed red. Julian swore. "The finance server's trying to reauthorize wire access." Angela's voice crackled through the intercom. "I didn't request that." "Then someone just did it from your credentials," Everett growled. Clara snapped her fingers. "Trace the signal." Maya was already on it. Her fingers moved fast, chasing IP echoes and terminal routes. The path zigzagged through internal servers, mimicked email patterns, even faked typing cadences. But then it paused just long enough for Maya to spot the delay. "There," she shouted. "That posits the same 12-second lag." Everett leaned over. "Where's it coming from?" Maya narrowed her eyes. "Sub-basement, server pod 4B. That's where we store the offline backups." Julian grabbed his badge. "I'll go." No," Everett said sharply. "We all go." They raced down the stairwell, 3 flights underground to a part of the building most employees didn't even know existed. The corridor was dim, lined with concrete and exposed piping. They reached pod 4B. Julian swiped his badge, but the door stayed locked. "This door's been rerouted," he said. "It's running on external authorization." Maya stepped forward. "Wait." She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket, the same one she had used to transfer music files to her work tablet. "I saved a mirror of the firewall logs on this. If I can spoof the right timestamp." She plugged it into the access panel and typed furiously. The screen blinked, paused, then turned green. The door opened with a hiss. Inside, the air was cold and dry. Rows of blinking servers lined the walls. In the far corner, a terminal was still active, code flying across it in bursts. Clara stepped forward, scanning the data. "It's not just pulling money. It's copying entire employee profiles, identity tokens, behavioral patterns." Everett stepped toward the console. "This is more than theft. This is identity hijacking. They were going to clone us digitally and run the company from the outside." Maya whispered. "That's why the system didn't crash. It shifted." Everett nodded grimly. "And if we'd hesitated another hour, it would have been too late." They began disconnecting the system, isolating it for forensic analysis. Maya backed up every file onto an encrypted external drive. As they walked back upstairs, the tension slowly eased from their shoulders, but no one was celebrating yet. Because they all knew, the real question wasn't how it had happened. It was who had helped it happen from the inside, and why. The next morning, Sloan Tower felt unusually quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that wrapped around your shoulders like a weight. The executive offices remained locked. Internal systems were still disconnected from the web, leaving the building in a digital standstill. Maya sat alone in the staff break room, her hot cocoa turning cold between her hands. Outside the window, dawn lit the skyline over Houston. Her father, Samuel, had just finished polishing the marble floor near the reception hall. He glanced at her, his expression warm but lined with concern. "You didn't sleep much," he said softly. Maya gave a tired smile. "Neither did you." Samuel poured himself a cup of coffee. You saved something big last night. I was part of a team, she replied, though deep inside, she wasn't sure how she was supposed to feel proud, scared, or just exhausted. Before Samuel could say more, the hallway door swung open, and Clara Monroe stepped in, flanked by Everett Kane and Julian. All three looked grim. We need to talk, Clara said to Maya. She stood immediately, brushing crumbs from her jeans. In a secure conference room, they pulled up the footage from the server pod. Clara pointed to a freeze frame, a grainy figure standing near the terminal just moments before the team arrived. Julian adjusted the screen. Whoever it was, they had internal access and clearance. Maya narrowed her eyes. The figure's face was turned slightly away, but the posture, the frame it sparked something. That's not a stranger, she murmured. Everett tapped a few keys, zooming in on the ID badge clipped to the figure's belt. Clara swore under her breath. It was Mason Trent, head of internal IT, a man with 2 decades of tenure at Sloan Dynamics. He had mentored dozens of employees, dined with board members, and hosted charity events. He was in charge of server protocols, Julian whispered. That would explain the smart relay. He knew how to embed it. Everett's jaw tightened. He knew exactly when and where to hide. He was counting on us never checking the sub-basement. Clara looked at Maya. Your firewall mirror? That's what broke the loop. If it weren't for that. Maya shook her head. Why would someone like him risk everything? Everett answered flatly. Because someone offered more than everything. That afternoon, a quiet, tense meeting took place with CEO Lawrence McMillan. The tall, silver-haired executive paced behind his desk, rubbing his temples as the team laid out the evidence. He's been selling behavioral data, Clara explained. Employee patterns, login routines, even speech analysis samples. To who? McMillan demanded. Julian didn't look up. We traced one terminal bounce to a shell corporation in Estonia, likely a front for bigger buyers. Maya, seated near the window, finally spoke. He was building a ghost company, a version of Sloan that didn't need us, that could exist on algorithms and faceless boards. The room fell into silence. Then McMillan exhaled sharply. Do we have him? Not yet, Clara said. He's disappeared, cleared out his home office, left town last night. But we've frozen the accounts and isolated the compromised datasets, Everett added. He won't go far without access. McMillan turned to Maya. And you? How old are you again? 13, she said. He gave a humorless chuckle. And you saw what seasoned professionals didn't. I just pay attention, Maya replied. He looked at her, thoughtful. Your father has been with us for almost 10 years, always early, never complains. Maya didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. McMillan walked over to her and crouched slightly to her level. We'll need your help, and I know you didn't ask for any of this, but we're in a place where quiet minds matter more than loud titles. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maya found herself back in the operations room, watching code streams with Julian. He handed her a small flash drive. Encrypted backup of the backup you made, just in case. She took it, but her hand hesitated. You think he'll come back? Julian's eyes darkened. If he's smart, no. But people like him, people who think they're smarter than the world, they always make one mistake. Maya glanced at the door, remembering the chill of Pod 4B. What if we already missed it? Julian offered a small smile. Then we'll find it. You and me, kid. Later that night, Samuel tucked away his janitor's badge and prepared to leave. Maya walked beside him down the corridor, where cleaners and security guards nodded to them with newfound respect. At the elevator, he looked down at her. You okay? I think so, she said. He gave a gentle nod. You know, your mom, she would have said this isn't just your gift, it's your calling. Maya blinked hard. She always believed in patterns, said even silence had a rhythm. Samuel smiled. And now you're teaching everyone else how to listen. As they stepped into the elevator, the building around them still shimmered with unease. The crisis wasn't over, but for the first time in days, a quiet hope returned. Not because the danger was gone, but because a janitor's daughter had shown them where to look. The next 48 hours moved like a fogged reel of tape constant motion, blurred urgency, and barely a moment to breathe. Sloan Dynamics was operating in emergency protocol, which meant only skeleton crews were allowed in. But Maya had been quietly added to the security clearance list, handwritten by Clara Monroe herself, and no one questioned it. Maya arrived early that Saturday morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a chocolate chip muffin in hand half-eaten. The lobby echoed with stillness, broken only by the low hum of backup generators and the occasional buzz of a keycard scanner. She headed directly to the cybersecurity command room where Everett and Julian were already stationed. "We caught a ping at 2:13 a.m., Everett said, spinning his chair toward her. It was brief, 36 seconds. Julian added. Mason's ghost company attempted to clone the behavioral profile datasets again. It failed. Your mirror firewall held, but it tells us he's still in the US. Maya dropped her backpack. He's not giving up. No, but he's running out of time, Everett replied. We've cut off most of his access. What he's doing now is sloppy, desperate. Maya nodded slowly. That's when people make mistakes. Julian smiled faintly. You're starting to sound like Clara. Just then, the door opened, and Clara entered, holding a printed dossier. I just got confirmation from internal audit. Mason's shell company was registered under an alias used during his college days, Reed Moreland. It links to an address outside Austin. Austin? Maya echoed. West Side, Tech Corridor, rented space inside an abandoned logistics hub. No employees, no traffic. But, Clara flipped the folder open. This photo was captured by a highway camera 4 hours ago. She laid it on the table. It was a blurry image of Mason behind the wheel of a white Honda SUV, heading south. Maya stared. So he's running, possibly regrouping, or trying to complete a transfer off-grid, Clara said. Everett stood. Then we move now. Julian glanced at Maya. What about her? Clara looked at Maya, long and hard. She stays here. Maya opened her mouth to argue, but Clara raised a hand. You're valuable here, and you're not a field agent. Maya, you're 13. Maya bit her lip and nodded, though the frustration burned inside her. She understood, but that didn't make it easier. By noon, Clara's team was en route to Austin. Meanwhile, back at Sloan Tower, Maya stayed glued to the monitor feeds. She shifted between code reviews, backup diagnostics, and a tracking script she'd written herself to detect any residual signature of Mason's movement. Samuel arrived around 3, pushing his cleaning cart through the hall and stopping by the operations room. Hey kid, he said softly. You haven't looked up in 2 hours. She leaned back, stretching her arms, just keeping eyes on the data. He set a bottle of water and a protein bar beside her. Your eyes are sharper than mine, but don't forget sharp things dull when overused. She smiled faintly. Thanks, Dad. Then something on her screen flickered. A subroutine triggered a ping. Maya leaned forward, typing furiously. Wait, what is it? Samuel asked, walking closer. There's a return signal from one of the dummy subnets. It's encrypted, but it's replying to itself. Samuel squinted. Is that normal? Number. Her fingers moved fast. It's like someone left a backdoor in the code that's now triggering automatically like a heartbeat, or a failsafe. Julian's voice suddenly echoed from the speakerphone behind her. Maya, you still at the tower? Yeah. I just caught something. Sending to you now. Julian took a second, then whistled. Where'd you find this? Buried in Pod 5A's offline cache. I think Mason planted it weeks ago, but it's learning. Learning? Samuel asked. It's adjusting to firewall patterns. It's not him typing, it's something he built, an autonomous loop. Julian replied. If it's self-evolving, it could trigger a bypass once the conditions match. Exactly, Maya said. It's not trying to steal data now. It's just waiting. Julian fell silent for a moment. Okay, here's what we do. Create a clone of the clone. Feed it decoy data. Make it think it succeeded. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard. On it. As the loop redirected into a sandbox environment Maya built on the fly, Samuel watched with growing awe. He didn't always understand the lines of code, but he understood his daughter's posture, determined, calm, focused. 10 minutes later, Julian confirmed the loop had been fully isolated. Clara's voice came through the speaker next. We found the hub. It's clean. He wiped it before leaving, but he left behind a wireless router still powered. Maya, your ghost loop just transmitted from here 30 minutes ago. Maya responded. Then he left it running as insurance. He was hoping it would finish the job after he disappeared. Clara's tone sharpened. You just outsmarted a man with 20 years of cyber warfare experience. Maya looked down. He underestimated who was watching. Clara added softly. And that's what brings systems down, not the breach. The blind spot. That evening, as the sun dipped once more behind the downtown skyline, Maya and her father stood at the rooftop of Sloan Tower. The wind tugged gently at her hoodie, and in her hand, she held the flash drive Julian gave her days earlier. You gonna keep that forever? Samuel asked, watching her. She smiled. Maybe. Or maybe I'll build something better with it. He gave a proud nod. You've always had that spark. Your mom saw it. I see it. Now they do too. Maya looked down at the city lights. Do you think it's over? Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. People like Mason may run out of time, but folks like you're just getting started. And for the first time, she believed that might be true. Monday morning arrived like a quiet drum roll. The sun had barely crested the downtown skyline, and yet the offices of Sloan Dynamics buzzed with subdued tension. The glass-paneled conference room on the 27th floor was packed. Executives, advisors, and senior engineers took their seats one by one, their eyes avoiding the massive screen at the head of the room. On it, a single phrase pulsed slowly in red. Integrity compromised. Clara Monroe stood by the window, arms crossed, her jaw tight. She had aged in the last 72 hours, not in the lines on her face, but in the weight in her eyes. Next to her sat Julian Crane, pale but focused, sifting through thick audit logs like a surgeon with x-rays. At the far end of the room, Maya sat quietly with Samuel beside her. The janitor's uniform on her father didn't match the designer suits around them, but not a soul questioned his presence. Not after what they'd learned. Clara turned toward the group. We've isolated the final loop and neutralized the breach vector, thanks to Julian's oversight and Maya's detection. She gestured subtly toward the young girl, who lowered her eyes in discomfort. A few executives nodded. One man even gave a slow clap. It quickly died in the heavy silence. Julian added, We also discovered that a third-party investment firm linked to Mason's ghost shell had started initiating soft bids for acquisition just days before the breach. His endgame wasn't just sabotage, it was takeover. A murmur passed through the room. Clara continued. And had we not intervened, those bids triggered by a phantom board meeting that was scheduled this morning would have had legal backing. An older woman near the center, Lydia Carterhead of the Internal Ethics Board, spoke up. So Mason designed a cyber attack to destabilize confidence, then tried to use that instability to justify selling off the company to himself? Yes, Julian said flatly, and he almost got away with it. The room fell into stunned silence again. Finally, a man in a light gray suit leaned forward. Howard Brinkman, one of the company's co-founders. I want to know something, he said, his voice slow and measured. How did a child, no offense, find what our entire cybersecurity division missed? Maya looked up, and for once, her voice didn't shake. Because I wasn't looking at the walls, I was watching the floor. Her eyes scanned the room. He didn't hide it in the code. He hid it in the way the code behaved. Most people look for malware like they're hunting wolves. But this was a ghost. It didn't bite. It echoed. No one interrupted. Even Howard seemed taken aback. Samuel spoke next. She saw patterns, things none of us were trained to see. She didn't care who wrote the code. She listened to what it was trying to say. Clara looked at Maya with a mixture of pride and gravity. And because of that, Sloan Dynamics still stands. She turned back to the group. Effective immediately, the board has initiated a full purge of all systems Mason had touched. Legal proceedings are underway. But our real priority now, she gestured toward the screen, which faded into a blank slate, is to restore what was nearly lost. Later that afternoon, Maya wandered the now quiet corridor leading to the glass garden on the rooftop level. It was one of the few places in the tower that didn't hum with machines. She stepped into the soft air and sat near the planter wall, legs crossed, staring at the city below. Clara approached minutes later, removing her heels and walking barefoot across the cool tiles. She sat beside Maya without a word, letting the silence settle. I didn't mean for any of this, Maya said softly. I know, Clara replied, but sometimes life chooses you. Maya frowned. I'm just a kid. You're more than that. Clara looked out over the city. You see, there are two kinds of people in the world: those who wait for the fire to reach them, and those who smell smoke before anyone else can. You smelled it, Maya. You acted. Maya hesitated. Do you think he'll come back, Mason? Clara shook her head. People like him don't know how to disappear, but when they do come back, they're always weaker, because they're always alone. Maya turned toward Clara. And I'm not alone? Clara looked at her gently. Not anymore. As the wind stirred the rooftop garden, Maya thought about the chain of events that brought her here. The mop bucket, the spilled coffee, the screen with the red letters, and the moment she chose to ask a question instead of walking away. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she'd changed. Inside the building, in the main atrium, a new plaque was being mounted near the entrance. It bore an inscription Clara personally wrote. True integrity isn't in the systems we build, but in those who protect them when no one's watching. In honor of Maya Williams. By evening, as Samuel guided his cart down the empty corridor and Maya followed behind, no longer just a janitor's daughter, but something more. One thing was clear. This building would never see her the same way again. And the world? The world hadn't even started watching yet. The rain had returned to San Jose by Tuesday evening, soft and steady, tapping gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sloan Dynamics. The building had resumed its rhythm, employees moving between floors, tech teams back in their terminals, the buzz of normalcy creeping in like an old song. But something fundamental had changed. And not just in the systems or the structure, in the people. Maya stood near the reception desk in the grand lobby, her hands clasped nervously behind her back. Her shoes still squeaked when she walked on polished floors, and the oversized security badge clipped to her jacket swung with each breath. But the way others looked at her, no, it wasn't the same. She was waiting for someone. Miss Williams? A deep voice called from the main entrance. Maya turned and saw a tall man in military green, square-jawed, with gray at his temples and a leather folder in hand. Behind him stood two younger men, dressed in civilian clothes but carrying themselves with unmistakable discipline. Yes, Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. That's me. The older man smiled. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Ryland, Cyber Threat Response Unit. We've been reviewing the breach files your team shared. He extended the folder toward her. And we'd like to walk through some anomalies you flagged. Off the record, if you prefer. Maya blinked. Me? I'm just a kid. Ryland smiled. Exactly. Which means you're not tied down by protocol. We could use more minds like yours. Samuel, who had been quietly cleaning a far corner, watched the exchange from behind a potted fern. He said nothing, but a quiet pride gleamed in his eyes. Clara Monroe soon arrived and greeted the officers. After a brief handshake, she turned to Maya. I told them they needed to speak with the one person who saw it all first. And no, I won't take no for an answer. The group made their way to a small side conference room. Ryland opened the folder, revealing a printed map of server nodes and attack vectors. We believe what happened here at Sloan may have been a test run. Not just sabotage, but reconnaissance. There's a fingerprint we've seen before embedded deep, dormant code meant to wake under the right trigger. Maya leaned forward. You mean, there's more? Ryland nodded grimly. There's a network, and whoever wrote it knows how to hide in plain sight. Maya scanned the diagrams. Her eyes locked on a particular line of code nested within an authentication bypass. That's it. That's the same marker I saw when I first traced Mason's login trail. Her voice was quiet. It wasn't just about Sloan. It was always bigger. Julian Crane, who had joined the meeting halfway through, cleared his throat. We've since learned Mason had contacts overseas, shell companies that tied into bidding interests in Eastern Europe, a front in Zurich, and suspicious connections to defunct crypto exchanges. Ryland closed the folder. Which means you didn't just stop a company from being stolen, you stopped an entire network from getting its foothold on U.S. soil. Maya swallowed. So, what happens now? Clara leaned forward. That's up to you. 2 weeks later, the Sloan Dynamics atrium was filled with quiet applause. It was a small ceremony, unadvertised, but not unnoticed. A podium had been set up under the main skylight, framed by 2 tall flag stands. Employees, friends, and a few city officials had gathered, including Maya's school principal and a camera crew from a local news station. Clara stepped to the microphone. There are moments when a company's future is defined not by profit margins, but by people. When someone reminds us that courage doesn't come from age, or rank, or title, but from listening to your own instinct when the world tells you to stay silent. She looked toward Maya, who stood beside Samuel in her simple dress and pressed sneakers. "We owe a great deal to Maya Williams," Clara said, "for seeing what others didn't, for standing up when it was easier to walk away, and for reminding us that no act of integrity is ever small." As the room applauded, Maya stepped forward. She had written something short, just a paragraph, but as she stood at the podium, paper in hand, her voice carried more than she expected. "My mom used to tell me, the world doesn't ask if you're ready, it just throws the moment at you and waits. That's what this felt like. I didn't mean to be a hero. I just asked a question. I just followed what didn't feel right. And I guess that was enough." She looked up, meeting the gaze of dozens of adults, engineers, lawyers, analysts, and for once, didn't feel small. "So if you're ever the quiet one in the room, the one no one notices, don't let that stop you. Because sometimes, being quiet means you're the only one actually listening." There was silence, and then the applause swelled again, louder, longer, richer. That night, at home, Maya sat beside her father on their apartment balcony. The city lights flickered in the distance. A soft wind rustled the potted plants her mother once cared for. Samuel handed her a mug of warm chamomile. "You did good, baby," he said. Maya smiled. "You always said mop handles teach you balance. I just didn't think that balance would be between a firewall and a federal task force." Samuel chuckled, then grew quiet. "You're different now. Not in a bad way. Just, I see it. The way you sit straighter. The way you breathe." "I guess I'm not invisible anymore," Maya whispered. "No, you're not," he said. "But don't ever forget the strength in being unseen too. That's where you built your courage." She leaned her head against his shoulder. And for the first time since that long night in the server room, Maya allowed herself to simply be still, safe, seen. Outside, the city moved on. But inside one home, a quiet victory glowed brighter than any skyline.